Thank you all of you to joining us today. I am Jaruwan Misit, the project manager at the University of Luxembourg Competence Center. So it's my great pleasure to welcome you all today to the webinar in the title of the AI for Truly Responsible AI. So this webinar is a part of the skill and training in LDIH project that aims to leverage digital skills, in manufacturing and industry. So this project is available in Luxembourg and also in a great region. So today we have two speakers with us. We give a talk in the AI Act. So we have the first speaker, Mona Caroline Thomas from the Govern and Law. And we have the second speaker, Nicholas Switek from Mateco Holding. So hello, Mona, Nicola.
Hi.
Hello. Glad
How
to
are
be
you
here.
doing?
Great. How are you?
Yes, thank you. So before we meet with our two speakers, let's talk a little bit about the, how to use the platform over here. So if you have any questions, you can put in a chat, and our chat is in the right panel. You're gonna see it in the, you see the terms chat in the right panel. If you have any questions, you can put your questions over there, and then I will collect all the questions, and then I will publish it at the questions and the answer sessions, at the end of both talks. So before we listen to our speakers, we're going to talk about a little bit how or who we are. So let's move to the next slide. So we are the LDIH. We are the LDIH, which is the Luxembourg Digital Innovation Hubs. So our mission is to support Luxembourg's manufacturing companies and industry sector in the digital transformation. And we are focusing on Industry 4.0, where the innovation matters. So we have the national platform to bring the requirement and solution together. And this platform is available on LDIH.lu. So again, it's on LDIH.lu. So we try to enlarge our DIH network to foster the collaborations between the companies, providers, researchers, and also the other actors. If you can see our slide, on the right, so we have the list of the actors. We have the research organizations, startups, SMEs, large companies, industry associations. We have the investors also, participate in this project. We have the governments to support us, basically on the fundings. We have the incubators, and also we have the other actors, that gradually join our project. So we try to inform you about the digital transformation, inspire you to use the digital transformation, and engage you into this community. So let's see the list of our services. So you can see from the bottom of the slide, we have our consortiums. We have the Lux Innovation, who is leading this project. We have the University of Luxembourg itself. And we have LIST, the research institution. We have the Luxembourg House of Cybersecurity, and we have us, the University of Luxembourg Competence Center. So we have the list of these services. We have the digital maturity assessment, cybersecurity maturity assessment, digital skills assessment, which is performed, which will be performed by us. We have the digital roadmap support. We have the investment support. Like if you need the financial support, you can also contact us, and we can guide you to the right direction to get this support. We have the digital industry training catalog, which is performed by us as well. Well, we're going to talk about these services that are performed by us at the end of the talks. We have test before invest. Yeah, and we have the LDIH marketplace. All these services are provided by, like some services will be like, for example, the cybersecurity maturity assessment performed by the Luxembourg House of Cybersecurity. And we have the digital maturity assessment performed by the University of Luxembourg. And then we have the list who is performing the test before invest, and then the rest is from Lux Innovation. Okay, so now we're gonna meet with our speakers. So let's meet with the first speaker, Mona Caroline. So she is the founding lawyer of the Govern Law. So Mona, now the floor is yours. So please go ahead. Do you need help with your presentation?
I think I'm fine. I'm just uploading it. If you could tell me when you see it.
Yes, now we can see it.
Great.
Here we go.
Am I ready to start? Thank you so much.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well? Is
Yes.
it all good? Awesome.
Yes.
So, hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today, together with Nicolas, and many thanks to the Competence Center for the invitation. So my name is Mona Caroline Chamas, and I'm the founder of the firm Govern Law. It's a disruptive law firm, as we like to call it. And we're really focusing on integrity, especially managing ethics and compliance, good governance, with a focus not just on corporate governance, but also on innovation, data, and AI governance, which will be of interest today. And better law, because we also advise on law reforms and how can law better empower society changes for the better. And perhaps that's the main difference between innovation from a technical standpoint and progress from a societal standpoint. And what will be interesting as we explore the AI Act today is to see how law is actually a form of intelligence that can help you better address risks associated with artificial intelligence. And that is not to say that it doesn't have opportunities, because obviously we wouldn't be talking about AI if we were not all here passionate about the potential of AI as well. Switching slides, yeah. So in a nutshell, I'm sharing that with you because these are our values at the firm, and we set them almost 10 years ago. But interestingly, they come very much into light today because they are somehow pursued by the AI Act and what we can aim for when we talk about responsible AI. So it's integrity by design. What do we mean by design? It's not just a buzzword. Human centricity, responsible innovation, impact with purpose, and how can we create value with value. So the point is not necessarily to become a charity by doing good and doing well. We can definitely create value from a business standpoint as well. So in a nutshell, Nicolas will greatly present use cases from his experience. So I propose to set forth the framework, if I may say. Don't worry, you're not expected to be lawyers here. The goal is for you to grasp perhaps the highlights of the AI Act to the extent it applies to businesses. And when I say businesses, I say businesses, but also the public sector, non-profit sector. There's really no restriction as to the actors when it comes to the AI Act. But so I'd like to share with you perhaps 2 or 3 legal keys or some forms of legal intelligence to smarter AI strategy. A zoom on the AI Act, into the AI Act, and then perhaps a walk the talk with 1 or 2 examples. But if we're running short of time, that's when I'll pass the floor straight to Nicolas. And Nicolas, don't be afraid to tell me if I go beyond my time, because sometimes I get carried away. So feel free to raise your hand if I'm going beyond my speaking time.
Will.
So a few legal keys to smart AI strategy. The first thing I want to share with you is that everyone talks about ethics, but no one knows what's in it. And perhaps that's the same with law, right? So without anyone being expected to be an expert in ethics or in law, what I want to share with you is that we should stop procrastinating as to what it means. In fact, to say that ethics is not law would be an insult to law, actually, because a lot of laws do have ethics as their cornerstone or as their objective. And that's true for the AI Act, is true of the GDPR, is true, of course, of human rights, which are mandatory, by the way. So there are many, many laws, even anti-bribery laws, fair competition laws, IP laws. So there are a lot of ethical stakes at hand in law, right? The advantage of law is that normally in developed and democratic countries, it has gone through a democratic process. It is of general application and it is enforceable. So everyone is supposed to abide by those ethical standards that have become mandatory ethical standards, and it's called law. And we think that law is boring and ethics is sexy, but in fact, law is boring only because it's written in a nitty-gritty jargon, which is extremely boring even to lawyers. Trust me, if you have issues falling asleep at night, have a piece of law and you will fall asleep right away. I agree. But so in the way it is translated is not always user-friendly, but in its very core objective, it is mandatory ethics. And that's the intersection you see in the middle, and the AI Act is in the middle. So before claiming to be doing ethical AI, start with those ethical laws, because everyone is supposed to do that. So it's also going to be a competitive advantage to be ahead of the game in terms of what's mandatory, also a smart way to manage risk, because obviously enforcement is around the corner. Now, that doesn't mean that all laws are ethical. You could think, for example, of environmental laws that may set a threshold that is not high enough and still enables or even sometimes, incentivizes pollution. So that might be the part of law that is not in the intersection, right? On the left-hand side, that's ethics beyond law. So that means that as a company, as a public actor, as a non-profit organization, doesn't matter. Even as a human being, you may decide to set ethical principles that go beyond what's already mandatory by law. And it's extremely important because many, I will say organizations, so I mean public or private sector, doesn't matter. Many organizations now are spending a lot of time writing ethical charters for their AI or technology. Don't waste too much time. Most of it is already in laws, in human rights. You can even summarize it in one page. So your real dilemma is, one, are you mastering what's mandatory, which is already quite some work? You can translate that in a sexy way if you want, in an ethical charter, but start from what's in the intersection. And then as your board of directors, your strategic committee, executive committee, innovation board, doesn't matter, can decide to go beyond that. For example, companies like Thales have decided to have a digital ethics charter beyond what's mandatory, with a principle, for example, of data frugality, meaning less data but better data instead of big data, because notably of the environmental impact of data, especially in AI, in deep learning, or even soon with quantum computing, right? So that's the first legal key I wanted to share with you, so that we stop a bit of the empty shells and sort of self-creation of what ethics means. The second key that I think is fundamental in any AI strategy, law is really prompting to be tech neutral. Once I heard a lawyer say, I don't want to talk about AI and generative AI, it's evil. I was like, oh my God, that's the worst thing I ever heard, because what does it mean? First, you cannot say that there's one AI or one type of innovation. The point is to be tech neutral. And that's what the AI Act is as well. We are not setting up front whether it's good or bad. We do recognize that there's amazing potential for progress in technology generally and in AI in particular for this talk. And of course, you should first maximize that. If there's no such thing as something that will be better with the AI, then let's not talk about AI, right? So before even talking about risk, we should first acknowledge and test whether the positive potential of the AI project is real and is realistic. I saw AI projects, for example, that were really nonsense. So even the left-hand side was not there. So there's no point wasting time in managing risk and issues if the potential for progress is not there. And if it is there, then of course we do acknowledge as well that sadly, but realistically, it often comes with side effects. And sometimes side effects are so bad that it will be a no-go. And sometimes they're not that bad, and we think that the better part is worth the pain of trying to mitigate the risk. So it's not, and we're not saying that the better part will always compensate for the bad part or for the worst part. That's something we will see in the risk management framework that the AI Act is offering. So examples of for the better, and perhaps some of you are already very familiar with what AI can achieve. I see there are questions. Yeah, okay. Okay, we'll get into questions after the presentations, I think. So for the better, in transport, for example, at the firm, we work on autonomous vehicles. It's great, you can go from one point to the next. It's been tested in California a few years ago with actually European technology in it. It can be used for package delivery for people that cannot drive anymore, the elderly. So amazing, it's not just potential, amazing achievement there. Same with justice. We can help judges make better decisions with fast track screening of past case law. At the same time, the downside is that because case law tend to be racist on average, AI may also lead justice to be completely wrong. So again, the better and the worse. In fintech, in education, in health, in energy, marketing, agriculture, and so forth. Not a single sector nowadays doesn't have a potential for progress or current progress going on thanks to AI, whether it's robots, IoT, algorithmic programming in broad sense. So there are many different forms of AI. Not for worse, that exists too. Some are in French, some are in English, I'm sorry. But very interesting. So in one case, an autonomous vehicle has actually gotten into an accident with a robot. Worst case is when it actually is getting into an accident with human beings that can be killed or harmed. Or as we know, whistleblower uncovered the fact that Facebook would encourage hate speech for profit based on algorithmic programming. Or we had even discriminatory biases in AI. That's a very interesting report by UNESCO on the top right side of my slide here, which is called Girl Trouble. It's indeed a trouble for humanity because it shows that lack of diversity and gender diversity on your AI team. I'm not even talking about your data sets. Right? I'm not even talking about biases in the data, but about biases in the very human team that is working on the project will actually exacerbate the discriminatory effects and unfair representation of society as an outcome of the AI, right? So let's say a male-based team is developing an autonomous vehicle, a self-driving car. It might be more likely that if there's a dilemma as to who should be killed by the self-driving car, women will be more often harmed than men simply because they were not factored in the thinking at team level, right? Algorithmic and collusion, that's very interesting too. We see a lot of things happening in business in terms of setting prices, customized experience, and so forth. But you can also do automated price fixing cartels there. Same with corruption, same with pollution, and so forth. So there are many, many different fields where it can also be pretty worrying. Here are some examples, because I get a lot of questions about generative AI as well. The risk, of course, there's a lot of progress that can stem from Gen AI. I'm an AI fan, right? Or otherwise I wouldn't be here, but we have to be honest about the risks as well. And sometimes not just risk, about the infringement and the harm. And why I'm talking about infringement and harm, because these are not just risk. An infringement and a harm is something that has happened already or that is happening. So it means that your risk has materialized. It's not a risk anymore. You're beyond the risk because the wrong has happened, right? Either the wrong, the harm, or the wrongdoing. It can be disinformation, manipulation, exploitation of vulnerable people, what we call hallucination, like deepfakes and so forth, but also organized crime, automated copyright violation. I would say usually what's related to IP or even GDPR to me are not the key issues, even if we talk a lot about that. I'll be a bit provocative. To me, the real issues are threat to life, threat to health, discrimination, threat to the environment, and threat to human dignity in the deeper sense, if I may say. So let's not focus just on privacy, because obviously if you're dead, there's no privacy anymore. So we're talking about AI that can have deeper risk. I work, for example, with a client who's in video gaming, and their risk is actually suicide by minor people, right, because of addiction. So we're talking about real stuff here. The third and soon last key, we talk a lot about the black box in technology, and I'm sure you, ladies and gentlemen, might be familiar with the black box dilemma in AI, meaning that sometimes it is self-learning. So it is actually processing information in a way that can lead to outputs, like the way the robot would function, the way the medical device would function, the way the vehicle would function, or the military drone, you name it. And sometimes it is fully planned that A plus B would lead to C. That is not a black box, you can explain it. But sometimes not just A plus B will lead to the C outcome. Sometimes with the self-learning process in machine learning and deep learning, it will be A plus B, and then the machine learning will also factor in D, E, F, G inputs and lead to Z. And that was not foreseen at all. And so that's a black box dilemma, especially from an explainability standpoint, but it's also true for law and ethics. And so I'm really inviting everyone here to be humble, not on the tech front only, but also on the ethical and the compliance front, because law and ethics can be diverse, very complex too. There are thousands of rules that apply to technology and AI, not just the AI Act. So we should be humble about what's the essence of what we need to understand in technology and in law and ethics to try to ensure interoperability between both, right? And that means from a governance standpoint and from an education standpoint to make sure you have the right talents within your organization. On the technological side, that's often part of the job description. But even in your legal or ethical department, if you don't have one, whether you have the right experts to help you that are really keen on trying to unlock, I would say, the complexity of that black box as well, to make it very user-friendly and then to see what's possible to connect. The last key is, why should we focus on AI as a priority, even from an ethical and responsibility standpoint? And that's something actually I presented just this slide to a board of directors recently who are not very familiar with AI, but they feel that they have to get into the game. And I told them, beware, that is not just like the sexy, nice thing you need to talk about because everyone is talking about. The stakes with AI are massive. Why? Because, a board of director, an executive committee, or even a risk committee, their job is risk management, strategy and risk management. So risk and strategy are the two keywords for any organization that wants to function well and to be a bit, ahead of the game as well, or at least not behind. But AI is not like the cherry on the cake to look good. The challenge with AI is that whether it's for the better or the worse, it's going to get automated. It can be autonomous. It's extremely fast, the volume of data and outputs is massive. There's a sense of variety, right, of issues and outcomes possible. There's also the issue of opacity. I just mentioned the black box, and complexity. But even if you take just the fact that it could be automated, an automated crime, or automated death risk, or automated discrimination, or automated price fixing, it means that it's not just like one, corruption or pollution or discrimination occurrence that you have to handle. It's potentially millions per day. Same with autonomous. It's not just one bad guy in the company who got it wrong. You have your robot or your algorithm that is going to function by itself once it is programmed, right? So just those aspects of AI, even if AI is not your core business or not yet, should really, encourage everyone to care about it and to make sure to ask the right question. So are we going to automate, for example, the best and the worst? How does systemic and systematic discrimination or life threat look like? So the whole point of the AI Act, but not just the AI Act, by the way, is how we're going to maximize the virtues while neutralizing its danger. And I'm saying neutralizing because sometimes mitigating won't be enough, because we know that mitigating doesn't mean zero. Okay? So now I do a very quick zoom into the AI Act. First, I always say we didn't need moon law to go to the moon. And we might not have needed an AI Act to handle AI. The reason why the AI Act has been issued is because fundamental rights, so human rights, have been there for 60 years. The Human Rights Convention at UN level, at European level, have been there for decades. Have you ever cared? Probably not. And they're summarized or summarizable in one page. You see them here. Freedom and equality, life, health, a ban on slavery, a ban on discrimination. These are fundamental human rights. It is ethical and it is law, by the way. But why do we have the AI Act today? Is actually to make it now mandatory for everyone to care. To be like, okay, whatever we do, what's going to be the impact on human beings, on society, on democracy, and on the environment? So we are not reinventing the wheel in terms of what we should care about. We are reinventing the wheel as to the fact that now everyone must do it. And you're told at least a minimum of actions you have to carry out and to conduct to be sort of credible as to your efforts in terms of risk management and monitoring. So that's, if I were to summarize the AI Act, is we really care about human rights that have been there forever, that is just common sense in a way, and we're telling you how to assess your risk, how to categorize them, and depending on how high your risk are, the higher the risk, the more you have to be diligent and careful. Now be aware that the AI Act is not the only piece of legislation that is coming out. There's the AI Liability Directive, an AI Convention. There's also other pieces of legislation that are not focusing on AI, but they do apply to AI, right? There's no exception for AI, like product safety regulation and liability. And very interestingly, I'd like you to remember that the whistleblowing directive is a great tool for AI engineers to blow the whistle if they feel that there's an ethical risk that was not carefully addressed. So make sure if you have a whistleblowing line that you do address tech ethics as well. And I guess you're all familiar with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence. So that means that your sustainability impact has to be graded in many fields, including in your supply chain. And that's also true for your AI providers. It's not exhaustive. I kept it very simple for you today, but just make sure that you're not just focusing on AI, the AI Act when you're doing AI. And they all have in common just these 3 points. Human rights, yes, all of them. Are they in your strategy, in your decision, in your operation? Risks, what's your risk matrix? What are your gross risk and net risk after you have taken some mitigating measures, and risk for which stakeholders, not just for yourself? And this principle of transparency, to me, transparency is not a value and is not a goal. So if you think transparency is ethics, I would respectfully disagree. To me, it's more about explainability and how to make intelligence intelligible, right? Without necessarily harming trade secrets either. So we have to find a good balance between the so-called goal of transparency and another virtuous goal as well of confidentiality to some extent. So what does the AI Act do? First, let's be proud. It's the first huge piece of legislation. I don't like the term regulation because it means something else, in fact. It's a piece of legislation that is general, that is mandatory, and that does not only apply to Europe. So let's not be complaining about the fact that we will be harmed towards China and the US. It is not true. I won't get into all the details here. There is a link to EU, which is this AI used in the EU, targeting EU users in a B2B setting, in a B2G or B2C setting. But so there are indeed, there's really the protection and the interest of Europeans and EU-based people and companies at stake. But trust me, Chinese and American players are not spared at all. There are different geographic criteria that show the extraterritorial application of the EU AI Act. And I can tell you that for being in contact with other continents, they envy us for passing this legislation with 27 member states, which is really an achievement. Now, if I have a few minutes, I'd like to really show you the big picture. The AI Act is all about mastering risks and mastering governance. I like to say, show me your governance, I will tell your compliance. And that's why the firm is actually called Govern and Law, because your two tools are governance and for us, legal intelligence, but how you use that intelligence to master your risk. Risk for what? For human rights, health and safety, democracy, and the environment, right? It's all about that you have your plan here, if I may say. Now, when we talk about risk and governance of what, by whom, how, and when, right? I've seen sometimes risk metrics, but companies were assessing risk only for themselves. Here we talk about altruistic risk assessment. Of course, you can find in the AI Act the definition very quickly. An AI system, which is what the AI Act applies to, is a machine-based system designed to operate with varying levels of autonomy that may adapt after deployment and for explicit or implicit objectives infer from the input it receives how to generate outputs, right? And it can influence the physical and virtual environment. So think of AI as you have inputs like data or sensors. Something happens with the input, like through an algorithm, for example, and the output is what was intended or not. I'll give you an example with the self-driving car. The input would be data, the car itself, all the sometimes the people, the money, everything that is needed to and of course the technology itself. That is the input. You have the algorithmic programming. That's, I would say, the secret kitchen sometimes. And the output would be the fact that the car is indeed driving from point A to point B, right? So that's an AI system. There's also a definition of generative Gen AI, or what they call general purpose AI system. I don't want to get you lost into definitions and text, so I have tried to make it very simple and short. The second most important thing is for you to identify whether in your AI strategy you act as a provider, that means a developer, a deployer, that's a business using or integrating an AI developed by someone else, or professional users, importers, distributors, manufacturers, and what we call authorized representative. Again, we don't have time here to go into all the details, but who are you in the value chain of the AI is paramount. When we talk about affected persons, here we talk about humans, right? Anyone who can be potentially affected by the AI. And then there will be institutional players created by the AI Act, the AI office at the EU level, notifying authorities and notified authorities. There will be indeed a notification system, especially for high risk. Now the core, I was talking about governance. Make sure that you have the right people that govern your AI project and that you embed this thinking quite early. I talk with a lot of, this one. I sometimes speak with AI teams and they tell me, we wish we heard your question earlier in the project, because they can have a real structuring or challenging impact on what we are doing and whether it's right. Not that we get it perfect, of course, but again, that's why the AI Act is a type of legal intelligence, which you can call responsible or ethical intelligence if you wish, that is really going to empower your project, make it sustainable, because sometimes it's very hard if that thinking arrives too late in the project. It's very hard to reverse engineer sometimes what has been developed, or it would cost too much. So we see sometimes amazing projects where those stakes are considered early and high enough, and when it's too late, sometimes the project gets killed, or it's put on the market with high risk and pretty troublesome reputational effects, obviously. The cornerstone of the AI Act is here. So first, you identify whether anything of what you do falls within the definition of AI, which is pretty broad. Secondly, what is your key role? As I said, deployer, importer, provider. So you have that matrix. Then for each AI, you will have to identify what kind of risk is at stake in terms of type of risk, the typology, the probability, and the gravity. Probability and gravity are usual metrics for risk assessment, right? You're all familiar with that. The typology is quite new, and I don't know whether I'm not sure it's large enough for you. I hope you all have good eyes or good glasses. But so there are 4 categories. Unacceptable, that's a no-go. It means that no matter how great your purposes were, it's a no-go if those risks are at stake in that AI. High risk, that means that you will have the highest level of measures to adopt, so a compliance by design approach, to try to neutralize those risks if you want to go ahead. Limited risk, you have a few obligations, and minimal risk, you can go ahead, right? But so your key priority here is to assess whether you're in the unacceptable risk zone, which is then a no-go, don't waste time on it, or you have to rethink the project to try to leave the unacceptable risk category and fall in the high risk one. To give you a few examples, an acceptable risk would be behavioral manipulation, exploitation of vulnerable people, social scoring, or real-time biometric identification for law enforcement. Not all biometric identification are unacceptable risk. The ones that are not for law enforcement purposes are in high risk. So again, don't necessarily stress out whenever you see a summary. Sometimes there are nuances, and some types of AI systems or components might fall in one or the other categories, and the annexes of the AI Act are specifying that. So that's the most important thing for you to assess at this stage. As I was saying, it's all about fundamental rights. You see on the left-hand side, what's unacceptable, we think that the AI Act, so the Democratic Act, decides that those fundamental rights are too harmed, too much at risk. You can't do that. Usually, it can either kill someone or harm someone too much, or prevent someone from accessing basic needs. So that's why it's prohibited. The conformity assessment, that's really whether there's an impact on health, safety, environment, and some fundamental rights, but to an extent that is deemed potentially with the potential to be corrected. Here's a zoom on prohibited systems, which I just mentioned. And here's a zoom. You'll have the slides. I think I'll send you a summary after the presentation if you wish. High-risk systems, right? Remember that Annex 1 is really by sector, because some of the sectors are quite regulated from a risk assessment standpoint, with third-party authorities checking compliance in those sectors, like medical devices, machinery, real equipment, for example. On the left-hand side, Annex 3, that's not necessarily a sector, but it's more a type of AI or a type of purpose. But again, don't stop to the summaries. There are always more developed ways of looking at it. For example, here you see that biometric is at the end with some details. Now remember that with high risk, you will need to go from your risk assessment to know in which category of risk you fall into your conformity assessment. A conformity assessment means that you have to meet a series of diligence, such as the following ones. First, you have to show what your fundamental right impact assessment is, to ensure human oversight, to ensure the quality of your input data. I insist on also the quality of your team, not just your input data, your input people, I would add. To have a mechanism to flag and report incidents, for example, to inform people and so forth. But so forget about privacy by design. Here we are about holistic fundamental rights by design, right? So it's something much larger, much more ambitious, very complex too, because sometimes, maximizing one fundamental right may harm another. But so the whole intelligence will have to go into your fundamental right impact assessment, and then on measures to try to mitigate that if you're in high risk. I think I will stop here with just one point. What are the consequences? The first consequence is to ensure that your AI is safe and good to go, because otherwise it might be banned from market access. There are fines up to 7% of global turnover. And of course, your reputation. And if there's a harm, like killing someone, discriminating someone, on top of the fines that are foreseen by the AI Act, you could also have fines or prison time or compensation to pay for any of the infringements that your AI led to. So that is what we call compliance by design, or compliance and ethics by design. And you will see that it's a fantastic exercise. And so in a nutshell, in our view, thanks to the AI Act, but not only, the main innovation in ethics will be to ensure the ethics of your innovation. So thank you so much, and I'll pass the floor to Nicolas for some great use cases.
Thank you, Mona. I will try to share my screen. I hope you can see me very well and hear me.
We can see you, but not your presentation yet.
Okay, here we are. Tell me if you can see my slide now.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So thank you again for having me on this online webinar to discuss such a great topic. So again, my contribution for today is to share our company experience regarding
Hello, Nicolas, sorry, but it's not in presentation mode, slideshow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Now it's better. So again, I was mentioning the fact that I would like to share a humble experience when it comes to dealing with AI. So I will present certain perspectives which, in our view, shape a path toward a company strategy, at least where more ethical AI. So I plan to do a quick refresh around key concept, but I will immediately skip it because Mona presented very well. So I will move immediately to my next step, which is to present the agenda. So I would like to discuss about who we are so far, and I will start with a brief introduction of Mateco and present you one of our key innovative projects where AI and algorithm express all their potentials. I will also move on by telling you about the challenges and risks having been met in this journey, and basically there are still a lot in the road ahead. And I would like also to discuss the fact that the AI Act provides a kind of safety belt. And very importantly, I would like to provide you with fresh insights for accountability and more ethical AI. So,
Nicola, I think maybe you're sharing in a different screen because we're still seeing the presentation mode.
Okay.
It says, right?
Okay, I'm sorry. I just to connect again with the slide deck. Okay, I hope this one will work. Is it better? Can you see my slide?
It's still in a PowerPoint.
Yes, it's a PowerPoint.
It's not in a slideshow mode.
Now I'm moving in a slideshow. Can you see it?
No.
Okay.
I think maybe using one screen or two screens.
Okay. I'm one screen. Okay, now I can. Is it better like this? No. What I can do? Doing again. Yeah, that's the best I can do here.
Okay, so I think we continue.
Okay, I'm sorry. Really sorry.
That's okay. So we continue. We can see here.
At least, yeah. Anyway, I will share my slide afterwards. So we are a Luxembourg-based company. We are established since more than 56 years, and our key business is to solve high access problem. So whenever our clients are looking for a platform to reach such high access point of 100 meters, we will find one, notwithstanding the place. We have in the fleet 45,000 rental units. We are a global company, 3,000 employees, mostly based in Europe, but also in Latin America. So our business model is really straightforward. We acquire high access equipment from supplier and we rent them to clients. Now, and a link to our topic of today, I would like to express the fact that we digitalize our business model using AI and algorithms. So, as you know, AI, and what I explained it very well, AI is transforming our world, and it does not only help us for restaurant recommendation. For us, as part of our company umbrella, we have a company where we have numerous IT specialized colleagues which are working on a fully automated system platform, which is mostly driven by algorithm and AI. The idea is very simple. We want to have the right product for the right client, and we start with sourcing. Which equipment would be the more promising in terms of revenues? How to better anticipate and to address the client needs of services. Our goal is to move from a reactive to a predictable approach. So it triggers to adjust the price list, the nature of services delivered, to understand the client's profile as per the order, the payment schemes, delays in payment, how they manage the rental equipment. Do we have a lot of accident with this client? So the platform we want to use using AI has a lot of implications in terms of client management, meaning commercial and business perspective. One of the specific outcomes of the algorithm work is the proper allocation of a rental fleet in areas where we should expect more business opportunities. So it will depend on the current potential industrial real estate project maybe to come, construction, road or warehouse. And here we are using a kind of scoring process like it happens in banking industry. For example, if a bank would like to grant you a credit. Our AI system wants even to go deeper because we want at a certain point of time to be able to determine what kind of talent, competence, skills, knowledge, or current, or maybe our future technicians will need to have to better assist our clients. And it will depend, of course, on the nature of the service we will provide to our clients. So here, it's a HR perspective in terms of talent acquisition and development. And all of this will be automated. Talking about the challenge, we move slightly from a technical perspective to a more global perspective. From the technical side, we have to try at least to understand the setup and the application, how it works with the tool. It's not that simple. It sounds like a black box. How algorithms come to a certain conclusion is not easy to explain. Unfortunately, I'm not a data scientist nor a developer, and it's not so easy to catch basically the work behind. This innovative tool we are working on is a moving target. So it started a couple of years back, and it has been tested offline, then it has been partially implemented and still in a learning curve. And the technologies are also developing at a very amazing pace. Data. We have a lot of data. Of course, I remember the earliest day, I was questioning the technical colleagues in charge, how can such tool make reliable predictions? And I will never forget the answer I received. No worries, we have at hand tons of empirical data. And these colleagues continue with, are we not existing since more than 50 years? Can tell you I start to be very nervous. Moving from the technical lens to the global perspective, out of a technical concern, very practical questions were popping up. In particular, the one links to the who is doing what when it comes to the governance of the tool. We may summarize it under the vocabulary of accountability. It rings a bell for the DPO here. How are measures the risk linked to the data set? How about the possible issues linked to the usage of this data? How are handled the risk pertaining to the result and the predictions of the AI tool? What are the privacy implications? To which extent privacy and personal data are taken into consideration? Is it enough? Is transparency sufficiently ensured? Training should be the cornerstone of such project, so it's important also to get on board the board members. Is there also a way to operationalize ethical consideration in a strategy? So we test the water. We create a risk model here. And our first focus was on evaluating what are the implications from a privacy perspective. What kind of data will be required? Personal data, yes, no. Do we need a DPIA? AI model always requires large amount of training data and preferably data of good quality. So for us, we have this data, out of the invoices of the clients, email, technical reports, billing process, CRM data, and so on. But are all the data accurate? Is it only internal data being used? Are we sure that our new AI app platform are not using data out of the internet? Are we sure it's our own data? Is there a way to anonymize those data, or at least to pseudonymize those data as a minimum? I was always pushing to remove each personal nature of data, so meaning to clean the databases using the requirement to have good data. We also review retention periods and deletion process. At all time, safeguarding the proper exercise of privacy rights was also something we have on the radar as well. Implementation of technical and security measures to protect our app from cybersecurity risk, at least to the best we can. Are we sure, and now we move more on the AI and ethical things, are we sure that the treatment of those data do not lead to discrimination practices? I mean, are there any bias we may have overlooked when setting up the data for the training of our AI app? And what about the results? Are they fair? Moving ahead, is it still possible for business people to have a kind of intervention on the results produced by our IT app based? So AI Act principles come into play because it was for us like a pillar for responsible innovation. So we dig into the AI app, and I will definitely skip this slide because Mona explained it very well, but we dig into the AI Act to check, if some principles were, we comply with those principles, and if there is something more we have to take into consideration in terms of strategy. And what we learn is a lot of insight in terms of accountability. And the first one was pertaining to governance. The entry door for us in this project was offered by GDPR compliance. Clearly, it was the initial reason why I was involved in this picture 3 years back, because I was the DPO. So it allowed me to work on the privacy by design, In my view, it probably was not a bad thing having the privacy professional involved. Why? Because we are used to implement evolving law with cross-departmental effect, if not cross-borders effect. We have some experience in terms of DPI, data protection impact assessment, and risk assessment. And why we should also not leverage on what we have in terms of assessment we did in the past, to fine-tune them. I also understand in different organizations, industry especially, But the privacy professionals are more and more in charge of ethical and AI things. But what we realize quite quickly is the fact that issues at stake will go by far beyond the privacy framework. Do I think the skills and knowledge of privacy professionals being sufficient to tackle the issue at stake? No. All what is pertaining to AI issues become more and more complex, and it intertwines with additional areas of laws and regulation. I'm thinking of IP, cybersecurity, online security, online safety, content moderation, and then I continue civil laws, human rights, fundamental freedoms, and in general, all what is pertaining to ethics. So there is a lot to take into consideration when we talk about AI in terms of impact for companies. For me, I got the relevant expertise because, and I encourage you, I can share the link after together with my slides, sorry again, regarding a certification organized by the EDEC Augmented Law Institute. We call it Digital Ethics Officer. It was a very valuable training for organization and especially for you to grow opportunity and upskill your people being in charge of AI app. And if you are looking also in terms of skill set of a digital ethics officer, I will share with you a link of one of my peers, Valérie Chavan, who has prepared a very nice article to explain what kind of skill set in terms the digital ethics officer will need to have. So we go far beyond the privacy competencies. Very important in terms of accountability, the board is ultimately responsible. I saw somewhere in the chat questions around who is responsible. And the idea why the board has to protect the organization from short and long-term ethical, reputational, but also regulatory risk. They have to identify the importance of strategic priorities, the nature, the pace of innovations, and last but not least, budgeting priorities. The questions for your board and senior management is therefore as whether they are willing to pursue an AI Act-specific compliance program or generally AI ethical or responsible AI program. In our experience with this project, we had a slot at the board committee where we were in position to present latest development, issue at stakes, and also possible blocking point. You may move ahead with the idea to set up a dedicated steering committee, which may become an ethics committee in the future, depending on your internal organization. But last but not least, in my view, people from all departments should provide knowledge and feel empowered when it comes to this kind of project. Risk assessment, I can almost skip this slide because I see the time, and Mona explained it very well. It's a risk-based approach program, so it requires a dynamic monitoring. The idea behind, of course, is to be agile and to monitor carefully the changes in terms of risk profile. So we have to adapt and adjust our program on a regular basis. In this, again, the support of the management is really crucial. And of course, we are talking here more and more about AI ethics by design, you know. So we have to assess risk, benefit of individual products, services, and to try to mitigate this kind of risk. We have also to implement checkpoints. Basically, it's not one for all exercise. You know, you do not start at the beginning and then you forget it. It's something you have to monitor on a regular basis. The insight number 3 we acquired out of our experience is pertaining again to policies and procedures. You know, the initial step when it comes to operationalization is the risk assessment, definition of a governance model, but then you have to establish internal written AI policy, procedures, tools to put in form, you know, all these ethical principles. There is a sentence I like very much. These principles are only as good as how they are operationalized. So the challenge is to build out of high-level principles into concrete practical guidelines and requirements that can be easily adopted and be scalable across your organization. It is clearly a multidisciplinary exercise. The last insight, and I'm almost done with my words, is pertaining to transparency. Communicate simply in an easy to understand manner. You may provide for documentation with various levels of technical information depending on the level of expertise of your readers. You may use this formula, why I'm saying this, for privacy things, and you can explain here what kind of data you are using, for instance. Just one note, the regulators expect a far more developed level of transparency. They may require from us detailed documentation, information about products, opportunities, We may also be invited to public consultation and to regulatory working group. That's certainly what the regulators will expect from companies like us. And to conclude, I will also focus on the training and awareness. It's really crucial to have everyone, your employee, to involve in these AI management activities, to understand what they are doing, for which purpose, to have a kind of sense of responsibility and commitment for ethics principles. One suggestion, again, I mentioned the DDO certification, which is very useful, but another suggestion is to set up a network of AI ambassadors or champions within your organizations, which can spread the word regarding ethics. So that's all from my side. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nicola. And later on, because we have some issue with the slideshow here, so maybe later if you can share some slides with us, then we can, you can select some of the slides that you can, share with us, and then later I can send to the participants today.
I will.
So thank you very much, Nicola. And then now is I will open the Q&A sessions. So Mona and Nicola, you have about like 10-15 more minutes, right? Or you are a little bit tight with the time?
I have 10 more minutes.
10 minutes, okay. So I will open the Q&A sessions, and then we can shoot, some of the questions from here. Wait a minute.
So there's a question, an interesting one about images, right, as input, whether it's for robots or cars. Like with any inputs, whether it's data, structured or not, visual or not, sometimes it's even sounds. For example, we worked on robots that can detect at home whether an old person, the elderly, would need support, right? Especially people living by themselves. And so it would capture not necessarily images in my example, but sounds or temperature. It would detect whether the person has fallen on the floor, for example. And then it would process that information, and it could either provide an immediate advice, or it could, contact right away emergency services or an emergency contact. So the question is always, indeed, what's your input? What do you do with the input, and what's the purpose and the outputs? And in terms of inputs, it's very interesting first to do a mapping of all the input you have, whether it's images, sounds, data, structured or not, people, even money, depends, and of course the kind of infrastructure. Once you have that mapping, especially with data or images, you would have to, we cannot do it here in a few minutes, but usually we have a grid of questions we would go through to see whether it entails different types of risk that have an impact, again, always on human rights, democracy, or the environment. For example, could the data identify people, right? Then you know that you are in a higher risk zone, because if you cannot identify them, well, even if it's aggregated, the output can still impact them. But if you can identify those people, indeed, it may present different issues. Is it discriminatory? Is it qualitative? Is it polluting? Is it even lawful in the sourcing of those images? For example, I'm on the ethics committee of a space agency, a national space agency. I won't name the country. And because it's confidential information, it's confidential reflection at this stage. But we are assessing whether even images captured from space by satellite, right, are precise enough to identify people, movements, even sometimes license plates. And the issue is not just personal data and GDPR, is it representative? Is it qualitative? Is the volume enough? What's the purpose? So again, there are a number of relevant questions to go through to make sure that your input is clean, that what you do with the input is clean, like your algorithmic programming, and that the outputs are okay as part of your risk assessment, and then your compliance efforts to be truly responsible.
Okay, thank you. So maybe we have another questions, maybe for 2 minutes, to answer these questions. For the medical field, the AI Act is based on risk approach. For example, which metrics does exist in the medical field to compare to use AI-based diagnostic versus the diagnostic traditional one that take in count risk and versus risk B.
I'm not sure I understand the question. If Felipe wants to clarify.
We can skip to the second one. Maybe this second one is also from the same person.
Yeah, so I responded to that in a way because I see quite some confusion, I think, between responsibility, accountability, and liability. In French, they would all be called responsabilité, but they are not the same. So if there is an error or a harm, it's a matter of liability, right? Who's liable for the harm? So qui est coupable? That's how we say it. And that's a liability issue that is treated either by courts or by the liability directive, right? It's not the AI Act. The AI Act is really about what you do before the harm occurs. And if it occurs, it's even worse because you have then two issues. But the first issue is how you're going to mitigate the risk of harm, right? Because it should not happen. It's really preventive in a way. It's not curative. And so the question is misdiagnosis. The question is if it uses AI or if you deploy AI or if you provide AI. So you remember you have to identify your role, or your provider, developer, a deployer, a user. Determine first your role. What kind of AI is at stake? If it contains the risk of misdiagnosing or treatment error, indeed, then we will assess first why it happened in terms of not having in place the right compliance mechanism and risk mitigation mechanism under the AI Act, and there could be sanctions for that part. And then for the harm part, that's the liability, you could have a second fine or a second penalty. But the whole point is not just to talk, I think, about penalties. It's really to talk about what has now to be put in place before and during the AI life, before the wrongdoing happens, to make sure it is clean from a human impact standpoint. And we haven't gone into all the measures, but it's indeed oversight, quality of data, whether the risks that are acceptable or not. And the medical device field, for example, is in the high risk annex list. And it has to go through different checks from a sectoral standpoint and from an AI Act standpoint.
I think this is the one that he, the questions, that related to the question that we had before, So he said in the medical field, risk A for AI versus risk B traditional.
They all have risk, of course, but the point with the AI, I think I tried to mention it, is whether it could be automated, autonomous, opaque, voluminous. So it's not going to be just one error by one doctor. It's going to be potentially automated, 1,000 times a day in different hospitals. So the impact, the risk of harm could be unfortunately much larger, and it's proportionate also to the fantastic impact it can also have by automating cures and correct diagnostics as well, right? So that's the stake with AI. It's really, again, volume, celerity, automation, and so forth. But the logic of the risk assessment in terms of impact is indeed there. What's different is that there might be often more stakeholders in the AI deployment and development. And again, there is not just like the doctor, the human being who is well identified, who made the error. Perhaps there will be one traditional identity, device. With AI. Sometimes it's much more complex. We have the same question with air transportation. The airline association contacted us and said, now there's really a debate as to who owns what, right? Data of passengers, the infrastructure, the algorithm, the software, the airplane constructor. There are many different stakeholders. There's AI in planes now. So on the good side, everyone wants to own the intelligence and the data and the output. But on the dark side, if something wrong happens, everyone recognizes that there's a wrongdoing potentially and a harm, like in medical treatment or diagnostic, but then who's liable? But as I wrote in comments, the liability points and who's liable and what presumptions of liability apply, that is not in the AI Act, it's in the AI Liability Directive or in courts. And that's another piece of legislation. That could be for another chat.
Okay, thank you very much, Nicola and Mona. So maybe we still have more to discuss. Maybe we can organize the second series.
And people feel free. You have our contacts in the slide. You can connect on LinkedIn. It's a fascinating topic, obviously.
Yes, later on you can summarize your slide, and then whatever you can share, they can send to the participants. Okay. Thank you very much for joining us today, and don't forget to join us in DIH.lu. So we have our community to participate in EDH project, or L for Luxembourg DIH project. Okay, thank you very much, and see you in the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.